Is Donald Trump actually a socialist? Well, it sounds funny, I know, but today we discuss.
Welcome to Venezuela Insider, the only place in Venezuela for expats, digital nomads, entrepreneurs, investors, travelers, and related internationals. For more information, venezuelainsider.com.
So today we are going to talk about if Trump is actually a socialist. And I say this because I see a lot of incoherence between what he promotes and his base and his ideas, what he actually does as a president. No, I'm not talking about it as a businessman or anything like that. And first, before you start slapping me around and leaving bad comments on the video, I have to say, first, I'm neither pro-Trump and against Trump. I'm not a leftist. I'm not a Democrat. I have no dog on the fight in these particular upcoming elections in the US. And also, actually, there are a couple things that I like about Trump that I cannot say here on YouTube. And also, I have to say that many years ago, before he started, being in politics, I actually like a couple things about Trump. I remember I used to watch The Apprentice. Remember when he was dating a teenage Melania. Also, I read The Art of a Deal and the books that he wrote with Kiyosaki that were actually good books, good reads. And of course, I know he's a good businessman and all that kind of thing. But today, I'm going to speak about some incoherences that I'm seeing from Trump regarding his particular political and economic position compared to what he actually does as a president and as a politician. So let's start. Let's start by the border wall that, of course, that was his, motto, one of the biggest campaign promises that he did back on the day before he became president on his first term. And, well, it's only term so far. Recording this video, this is months before the election. Well, anyways, he promised that he's going to build a border wall on the southern border, where, the Mexican border. And that particular border, Mexico, they were the ones, Mexican authorities or Mexican businesses, were the ones that they are going to pay for the construction on that particular border wall. Okay, and of course, he got elected, and that's a political promise that he did. And of course, most of the Trump supporters and voters, they wanted that particular border wall. Now, funny thing though, that since that wall that actually he built, so you have to give, he made his promise, so he built it, a half-ass way, just some trenches, some sections of the wall. Anyways, and first, that didn't stop migration in the first place, the quote-unquote illegal migration that many Americans complain. And the other thing is that actually the migration has increased. Actually, if you can pinpoint that particular time when the border wall and the sections of the border wall were constructed, actually the migration has increased significantly since he built that particular border wall. Okay, very good. First thing that is quote-unquote socialism, because is that particular wall was built with using public funds, taxpayers' fund, and also the particular wall was, of course, that was a public endeavor, and that's quote-unquote socialism, because remember, it's the thing about free market capitalism and socialism that is quite the opposite. Many people think there is a switch, and that's not the case. It's a degree. The countries, the most draconian socialist communist countries, still have some sort of free market, and the most free, liberal, free market capitalism nations that the US, by the way, is always dropping on those rankings, they still have some sort of public expenses and government endeavors and that kind of stuff. The particular border wall, I don't remember how much it costs, several billions of dollars. I don't remember if it reached $1 trillion. I don't remember the amount right now. But the main point is that the particular border wall was built first by the government, hence technically socialism, and it was used using taxpayers' money, U.S. taxpayers' money, socialism yet again. So you catch my drift. That sounds pretty much socialism to me. The second thing is China's tariffs. Okay. And I know that, of course, many of his supporters, they don't like China at all. Okay, nothing good or bad. I mean, I'm no pro or against China. I mean, I like a bunch of things that China does and a couple things that I don't like. I mean, but that's not my country. That's not my business. But a couple things that I can say positive about China. And one of those things is that the Chinese companies are very, very, very competitive. It is what it is. And also, by the way, I can say a bunch of good things about the US. I always say that. I mean, I think US is a net positive to the world. And also, I think China is a good positive to the world with a bunch of bad things on each side. And I'm not going to put it on the same way. But anyways, I mean, I know that you have your particular opinion about China, and that's totally fair, either if it's good or bad. And if you're watching this and you're a Republican or a Trump supporter, very good. If you don't like China, that's cool. The issue is that Trump doesn't like competition from China, but because he wants to protect American companies. But that's now how capitalism works. And regardless if you are a capitalist or a socialist, if you're a capitalist, that's a big no-no because you are putting artificial barriers in order to allow trade to happen on the first place. And that's very socialism to me. So he's protecting, quote unquote, protecting American companies from free market, from competition. That's actually what capitalism does. So that's first very socialist, if you ask me. And the other thing regarding the tariffs is that we know that the trade balance between the US and China is negative towards the US. So China exports more goods to the US and the US exports less products to China. But still, the exports from the US to China are actually considerable. So it's not like US companies are not selling goods and services to China. Anyways, so he puts the tariffs that increases the cost structure of Chinese products in the US, products that you see in places like in Walmart or Amazon or any kind of supermarket or store or service within the US. So you are hurting the average American citizen, putting those tariffs that increases the prices of goods and services for the average US citizen, and is also costing taxpayers money because you have to hire people. In this particular case, it's not like they have to build anything, but you still have to put bureaucrats from the American government that are paid with tax money, taxpayers' money as well. And it's a double, triple whammy. American companies get less competitive. Chinese companies are still competitive. They have to pay the tariffs. The American citizen has to pay the tariffs and also have to pay the taxes and the salaries and all of the public expenses of the bureaucrats that design this particular economic strategies. And if you ask me, that's a cocktail of socialism. Number 3 is the Muslim ban. And by the way, I'm not a Muslim, of course. I'm a Catholic. If you're watching this channel, you already know this. But of course, I don't have anything against Muslim people. I mean, I meet a bunch of Muslim people. They're cool. Also, I met Jewish people, also atheists. And so I'm a live and let live guy regarding religion. I'm a Catholic, and as far as I am not get bothered for being a Catholic, I'm cool. Anyways, now the issue with the Muslim ban is that where particular countries that have, of course, a large majority of their population, they are Muslims, of course. But the funny thing, though, is that usually what I found out, these particular 7 countries, I remember, those countries were also, quote unquote, poor countries, or as Trump calls them, shithole countries. Anyways, and when I first read the news about the Muslim ban back on the day, I remember that he's going to ban Saudi Arabia or Qatar or the Emirates. Well, I mean, those are actually, they have excellent relationships, those Middle Eastern nations with large majority of Muslim population. they also have excellent relationship, not only with the US, but also with Trump himself. But that didn't happen, of course, because those are, the not shithole countries. Those are the cute, beautiful Middle Eastern countries, rich countries. If you catch my drift, you can see Trump very happy here with Mohammed bin Salman, but nothing against bin Salman, by the way, that's your thing. Anyway, the point is that apparently this was, let's be honest, a very racist move, because the concern is that Muslims are delinquents and they are terrorists, and they have this narrative. And also, by the way, this particular policy was basically dismissed because it was an anti-constitutional policy by Trump. I mean, it's against the Constitution because you are attacking people just for their religion. And remember, the United States is the land of the free and home of the brave. Now, the main point is that regarding migration, if you want to prevent the bad things about migrants, you have a migration code, migration law, and also, of course, criminal law, and security law, and national security, and all that kind of thing. If you apply everything that the U.S. regarding legal framework, and also security, and also the Department of Defense, and I'm not a specialist on that particular thing, but the main point is, if you apply all of the things that you already have, you will not have a particular issue regarding crimes for a Muslim migrant, and also, of course, you cannot have legal migration because these particular people, they have a particular mechanism, if you want to call it, if you can dare to call it like that. I mean, I cannot say it with a straight face, but you have a migration code in the US that makes almost impossible for a migrant, unless he's a rich guy, to migrate legally to the US. And also, of course, you have the CIA, you have the Air Force, you have basically the US Armed Forces and the Marines and that kind of stuff in order to prevent something, of course, a terrorist attack against US soil. So it's yet again another stupid and also socialist measure by Trump. Number 4 is NAFTA. Right now, actually, it's called USMCA, thanks to Trump. And if you don't know a little bit about this, well, let's give you a Reader's Digest. NAFTA is the North American Trade Agreement signed by both Canada and Mexico with the United States. Basically allows free trade between these 3 particular countries with particular jurisdictions and particular tariff scheme and so much. And the 3 countries actually benefited from this particular agreement. However, it was due to be cancelled, or you have to renew this particular deal. And during Trump's administration, back then, also the Canadian president was still, I believe, Trudeau. Also, there was the prime minister back then from Canada. And okay, I'm not gonna discuss if Trudeau is bad or not. He deserves a video. Okay, probably I will do one in the future. Anyways, and Mexico had Enrique Peña Nieto as the president. He's kind of like a center right-wing president that actually has leftist policy. So that's a funny thing. It's like most politicians in Latin America. Anyways, I mean, Peña Nieto didn't do anything bad on this particular agreement. And Trump, it was just fitting that it wasn't unfair with the US companies and that kind of thing, but actually allows both Mexican and Canadian companies both to, if they are good, export high-quality products or products with a reasonable ROI to the US, so the US consumer benefits, and the US companies that are competitive can export those products to both Mexico and Canada as well. Both countries are very interesting markets in order to place US products and services. And also, you have that both Canada and Mexico have very decent GDP numbers, and also have a very particular consumer behavior that is kind of similar to the one that you have in the US. So it's a win-win-win situation. But Trump, wanted to be a drama queen regarding his politics and that kind of thing. But by the end, I mean, the good thing about this, he kind of reflected on the thing. He wanted just, do some drama. Trump is kind of like a drama queen, by the way. I mean, let's be honest, if you are a Trump supporter, you have to acknowledge that. Well, at the end, it worked pretty much fine. They left basically the same deal. But now it's called, instead of NAFTA, it's called the USMCA, but most people still call it NAFTA. The main point is that it's very socialist if you want to intervene and, of course, spend taxpayers' money in order to hold an agreement that's actually a free trade agreement, capitalism. So if you are against a free trade agreement, you are also, quote unquote, a socialist. And the 15th is migration overall. Of course, we already know that Trump doesn't like migrants, especially migrants from poor countries.
From Haiti and Africa saying, why do we want these people from all these S-hole countries here? Before suggesting the U.S. should have more people from places like Norway, whose prime minister he met Wednesday. Why do we need more Haitians?
Shithole countries, as he calls them. I mean, not my words, his words. And okay, of course, if you don't like or migrants because are more delinquents and that kind of thing, I mean, okay, that's up to you. I'm not going to discuss if you like migration or not. And I like legal migration, actually. I like when you have on each particular country, you have a particular legal system that allows, is fair, and also is very coherent. Sadly, the US doesn't have such migration code. It has a terrible migration policy, and that is the fault both from Democrats and Republicans, both sides of the aisle. The issue with migration is that in the US it's a very political subject, and many parts is like that. Because basically, migrants are an easy target for a politician because migrants cannot vote, they don't have the same rights, and that thing. And of course, the US, I'm talking the citizen of a country born and raised should have more rights than a migrant, even if he's a legal migrant. Okay, very good. I mean, I'm not going to discuss. But the main point is that you have a very draconian, very inept, very, banana republic migration code that doesn't work for anybody except for very desperate migrants that they are not going to get. They're going to get illegal to the US, and the valuable people stay outside. Anyways, first, if you're truly a free market guy, you are a libertarian, one of the things is that you have to agree that you want free movement between currency, capital, goods and services, and people. If you don't like migrants, I'm sorry, you are not a libertarian, you are not in the club. And it is what it is. And the main issue is that, of course, the US migration code is so terrible that doesn't allow free movement, of course, with legal structure regarding security backgrounds and a due process that doesn't exist in the US. Now, this is a funny thing, that this crackdown on migration, especially from the shithole countries from the South, that happened in the 90s, actually with Bill Clinton's administration, so a Democrat. And before that, many Mexicans back then, now the migration from Mexicans to the US is actually net negative. More Mexicans are leaving the US from Mexico or a third country than the Mexicans that are actually migrating to the US. Okay. Now, on the 90s, actually, it was less draconian, and Mexicans had a job, lived close to the border, and went to the US to work or shop or something like that. And they'd come and go. When the draconian measures on the mid-90s came to place, well, basically the border became, like a war zone, something like the DMZ in Korea. Well, and the Mexicans, I mean, they say, I'm going to stay in the US, and they have more migrants. Terrible policies. This from a Democrat, by the way. Back then, Bill Clinton in his administration. Now, the other thing is that Trump actually doesn't like legal migrants as well. Because I explained this a couple times, that the only way that a high valuable employee can migrate to the US is using an H-1B visa. That is very limited. The quotas for H-1B visas are very limited, just a handful of thousands per year. And also for a company, it's very expensive and it's a very dire process to go through on the first place. So the candidates are very, very few on the grand scheme of things. So you have a terrible process. The H-1B visa is something made by probably the worst bureaucrats that the US can have. Back then, I mean, talking back in the day. But Trump wanted to screw it even more. So that's legal migration. Remember, the H-1B visa is a legal migration for high talented, high skilled people. So Trump wanted to screw that again. Why more screw up than already the screw up that you have in the US regarding that particular regard? Yet again, if you don't like H-1B visas, you cannot call yourself a free market capitalist. And number 6, and this is probably the most banana republic policy of Donald Trump, is the Federal Reserve and inflation. Yes, actually, one of the bases of his campaign is blaming Biden on the high inflation rates that we have right now in the United States. And of course, Biden has a lot to do with that particular regard. But on Trump's case, it's actually his fault. He started that thing. Because when the Trump administration started, one of the good things about the US, they have a very low inflation rate. And he kept it on a similar way. But at the same token, he was pushing for the Federal Reserve in order to do more quantitative easing or QE in order to expand the money supply. And when that happens, what happens? The I word, inflation. And you can see the chart here when he arrived to the presidency. And he also changed the chair of the Federal Reserve. It was previously Janet Yellen, that now is the Biden's Treasury Secretary. Not a big fan of Yellen, but anyways. And he put the current president of the Federal Reserve, that is this particular, Jerome J. Powell. Yes, I know some of you like Jerome, but that's another thing. I don't have anything pro against Jerome. Okay, the issue with J. Powell is that first, he's a quote-unquote Republican, and he's a conservative. I don't know if he's truly a Republican. I don't know. I don't care. The main point is that he pushed both Yellen and also J. Powell in order to increase the money expansion of U.S. currency, and of course, hence that creates inflation. Now, the big thing comes during COVID. Of course, a moment of crisis, many people made a bunch of mistakes, and Trump was one of them. He pushed for the CARES Act and other stimulus package that costed trillions of US dollars to the taxpayer. But in this particular case, and by the way, it was vouched by Republicans, not only Trump, and basically that was money printer going bare, and that money directly monetized to the average citizen, and that's why we had in the US the stimmy checks, also the PPP loans, and all of that money printing that still today the average US citizen and the worldwide citizen actually is paying for that high inflation rate because Trump started that thing. Of course, Biden and the Democrats continued the same thing, but if you want one of the guilty people regarding the high inflation rate, you have to blame Trump as well, and of course you have to blame Biden and both the Democrats and Republicans. Now, my final thought, is Trump a socialist? You know the saying, don't listen what people say, watch what people do. And Trump actually applied a bunch of socialist policies and political left-leaning policies. It is what it is. Now, that by heart he's a true socialist? No, I think he's a right-wing populist with left-leaning economic policies, like most politicians actually all over the world. I mean, in the end, it is what it is. That's why I don't trust politicians at all, and neither should you trust them as well. Now, if you're watching this and you are a Trump supporter, I mean, okay, you don't want Biden to win and you want to vote for Trump, I mean, go ahead. I mean, that's not my country, but it's the biggest, most important country in the world right now. Is a superpower, the largest GDP in the world, a quarter of the worldwide economy is, of course, the US, the reserve currency in the world with the US dollar, and the biggest military in the world, and so on and so on and so on. That's why I have to do following on US, both economics and politics. At the end, if you want to vote for Trump, I mean, knock yourself out. That's not my issue, but do it with a good informed situation. And that's why I'm just making this particular piece of content.
Thank you for watching Venezuela Insider. Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on social media. If you want to work with us, VenezuelaInsider.com. Thanks again, and have a nice day.